Super dope episode today. I'm joined with Sultana Tafadar. I hope I pronounced your surname correctly.
You have?
Okay, brilliant. So my first question is to you.
Mhm.
Are you as scary and or as feared as I've heard you are?
No.
that's very that's a very straight answer.
But I want to be. The fact that you're asking this question makes me want to be scary and feared.
Why have I heard that you're feared or scared?
What,
You
what,
have quite a formidable track record.
I don't know who
I've
you've been
someone as
speaking
someone
to.
said, I'm not gonna say who told me, but I've heard that you kick ass when it comes to the courts.
I do okay.
Are you just being humble now? Is that what it is?
I am. I've told I'm not very humble, so I'm trying to inject a little bit of
No, but
humility.
I just,
I
I
totally
think
kick ass.
thank you. We need to move away from imposter
Okay.
syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. I know. I always talk about this, and here I am. No, it was humility. I have to inject a little bit of humility.
Okay, just a
Just lay
little,
the
just
foundation. Yeah, first impressions matter. So if people think I'm humble to start off with, then I can later on say as many outrageous things as possible, but people will think I'm still very humble.
exactly. Well, I am honored to have you on, and I know I've read your bio, I've read some of the cases. You have a formidable track record, and you are a dope role model, if I'm honest with you. But I want to ask, so there you are, a barrister, he wears hijab. How have you kept your identity so strong in the line of work that you do?
Good question. I think a lot of times people think you have to compromise. You can't be one and sort of you can't be all of those things and exist within the legal profession. And I don't think
Yeah.
that's necessarily true. You can still, I mean, for example, just to give some examples, I don't go to bars, pubs, I don't have anything to do with
Yeah.
alcohol. And that's one of the main ways people tend to socialize at the bar. And that's one of the main
Yes.
ways of also getting work at the bar. So if you're, is taking your solicitors out and schmoozing them in bars and pubs, or taking your clerks out. Clerks are people who work in chambers, so barristers' offices,
Yes.
and they get the work in from the solicitors, and then they sort of select who they give it to. And so if you're not
Hmm.
schmoozing the clerks, then of course you're not going to be on top of the list. So it's not supposed to necessarily work in that way, but in reality it does. And so, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't do that. So I have my own ways of, I work around it. I have my own ways of dealing with it. And actually, you can end up being more effective. And so, I mean,
Okay.
to give an example, I mean, during Christmas, for example, at my old chambers,
Yes.
everybody would buy like a bottle of champagne or a case of champagne for the clerks to celebrate Christmas, and they would just have stacks of this stuff in the corner of their room. And I would
Yeah.
just go out and get them some kind of a very nice sort of chocolate cake and leave it in the room for all of them to have. And in fact, because everybody buys the same thing, it just gets lost and they don't remember it. But they remember the cake that I bought and how much they enjoyed it. And so I do the same with solicitors rather than giving them, alcohol for Christmas
Yes.
or any occasion. I do the whole cake thing. And in fact, I also drop by the solicitor's office to give it to the hand deliver it. And again, it's an opportunity for you to sit and talk to them in a bit more of a relaxed environment. And again, that works because they remember you. So you being different isn't a disadvantage. It can be total. I mean, it can be completely used to your advantage. You're standing
So are
out.
you totally? But are you saying categorically that there's no advantage, or categorically that you, in any circumstances, that you'd have to sell out, as it were?
I don't think so. I can think of lots of examples.
Notwithstanding all that we know about the system in the UK and its disadvantages to ethnic minorities.
Yeah. Not really, no. I mean, much like Omran, I'm a criminal defense barrister, and so I guess my position, not that you're selling out if you're prosecuting, I hasten to add, before Howard calls me, but as a as a defense lawyer, I mean, we all go into it for pretty much the same reasons. You
Why did you go into it?
Okay, so I see myself, I'm female Muslim from a minority background. And I think,
Yes.
when you go through life, you have lots of experiences that relate to race, gender, and religion, discriminatory
Yeah.
behavior. And so I think most of us tend to develop a really strong sense of justice, a strong sense of fair play. And so we all, pretty much, when we go into the law, we have these ideas of wanting to fix things, of wanting to make sure that we're part of a system, or whether it is for that particular moment, it may be just for that particular moment, but we're doing something to advance the notions, these concepts of justice and fair play. And so that's what I see myself doing as a defense barrister, because a lot of the
Okay.
time the state has overwhelming power and resources to completely crush somebody. If they set out to destroy somebody, they can completely destroy somebody. And so I see my role as a barrister as acting as a buffer between the state and the person's individual rights. The blow, you ease the blow that your client feels or the defendant feels. You do what you can to get their voice heard, because
Okay.
your client may not be articulate or intelligent. And frankly, I mean, if you're not a doctor, you can't give a prescription. Likewise, if you're not well versed with the law, you can't really go into court and understand it and maneuver around it as a layperson. So you do need a barrister, and we're experienced in
Yeah.
that. We have the skills, and so that's what we do. We give our clients a voice, and we try
Okay. So
and
that's
ensure fairness. We try and ensure fairness, fair play, and all of those things.
so that's why you went into the into the legal profession.
That's why. I mean, before I came to the legal profession, before I started working as a barrister, I used to work for lots of different non-governmental organizations. And,
Okay.
we did lots of like research, we did lots of campaign work. But ultimately, I thought, unless I get into the courtroom, the law can be a tool for change. And unless I get in there, I don't know how much change I'm personally affecting. I'm part of a machinery, but I want to see more concrete results. I want to see immediate results. I guess it's a sense of
Okay.
importance. Yeah.
Okay, well then back to my question, which you were answering. To I changed, I kind of went off track. The question of knowing that the system disadvantages ethnic minorities, particularly
Yeah.
in the UK and across sectors,
Mhm.
across institutions, are you absolutely saying 100% there's no advantage at all to selling out, or no? And again, I feel like I'm saying selling out because that's how I perceive it. They might perceive it as, listen, I'm
Why
trying to
do
take
you
just me and my
see?
family.
Yeah, yeah. Why do you see my role as selling out?
No, I don't think you're all selling out.
Okay.
I'm saying the archetype of that person who is an ethnic minority, who acts as a gatekeeper or acts as somebody who denies the experiences of the community in which they come from,
But
in order to get a position.
no, the position is there to open the doors and to represent those from my community. My specialism for the last 7 years has been counterterrorism and national security work, and
Yeah.
I defend in those cases. So I'm not acting for the state; I act for the defendant.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
Of course. No, I'm not
Mhm.
saying you sell out. I'm saying why. I'm saying is there. I'm basically saying those that do so, in your experience of like you being amongst in the legal sector, being someone who's quite high up or someone who's quite respected. Do you feel like that's applicable across the board to people, or is it only a few people can keep their integrity in the legal profession?
You have prosecutors and you have defense lawyers,
Yeah.
and everybody has a role to play within the system. And
Yeah.
as long as they're doing the best they can, and for example, if a prosecutor is fair, then you can't really say they're selling out. It's having a
Okay.
prosecutor that's fair. That's the most important part. But then you have prosecutors who are overzealous and they want to prosecute this person against all odds. It's they become so involved in it, and everybody has to do their job properly, but some just perhaps maybe take it really far. But then again,
Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
yeah,
But there's several archetypes. Let's say the police, for example. It's
yeah,
no surprise if you were to ask many black boys their experience with particular black police officers.
yeah,
It's always much worse many times because there's almost this thing of like I have to prove myself to my colleagues in that profession.
yeah,
That black police officers have to prove themselves. They're not being too nice to people who look like them.
yeah.
So I'm saying that is the system designed in a way that if you have, I mean, what you're saying from what I'm gathering, that it's not designed in a way. It is actually, it does allow for people to still be themselves and maintain who they are within the system. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. I mean, it depends what people are. I mean, some come into it because they want to assist others. They have these sort of human rights perspective. Others come in because it's just a profession. It's just another job to do. And it doesn't
Okay.
matter who they represent. The politics doesn't matter. They're there to do a job.
Okay.
They can prosecute, they can defend, they can do any of it and all of it. And they can argue and fight just as hard, whichever side they're on. And there are some that don't really fight hard, whichever side they're on. You have prosecutors
Okay.
who fight really hard and don't, and you have defense lawyers that fight really hard and those that don't. And so it depends on the reason somebody came in. I mean, it's very difficult to
Mm,
yeah, it's sort of on a case by case basis. And I guess the term sellout is quite subjective. I mean, I may perceive somebody, let's say certain politicians, for example, who are from our community, but they're not really
Yes.
representing us. And that may be deemed a sellout. But on the other hand, there are those who may be in power and are doing things to advance their communities. But in the legal system, we have something called a cab rank rule. So you can't really necessarily pick and choose your cases. What comes your way, just like a black cab, when you hail it and it stops. Likewise, if you're asked to do a case and you're available, then that's something you have to do. I mean,
Okay.
I've obviously never been asked to prosecute, but technically, a prosecutor can pick up the phone and ask me to prosecute a case. But obviously,
Okay.
I've built up my practice doing defence work. So I
Okay.
understand
Okay.
what
Of
you're
course.
saying, but it's the answer isn't really straightforward given the way the system is. And I may personally think that somebody's sold out because that they don't really care about who they're prosecuting and so forth. But others would argue, well, that's just the system. You're just a pawn in the system, and you just do what you have to do, and the other side does what they have to do, and ultimately it's for the jury to decide who wins. And so if
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
parties
Fair
don't
enough.
do
Fair
their
enough.
job, yeah,
Fair enough, fair enough. And in terms of you doing defense work, a question that I previously asked one of our previous guests, who's our mutual colleague or
uh-huh.
friend,
Yeah,
Amran,
Imran.
do you have any kind of conflict of like morality when it comes to defending certain cases, or when you read their files and maybe it may have been a violent crime, or maybe been, I don't know, I'm not sure particulars of the cases you've been involved in,
Yeah.
but would you ever find that to be a conflict of morality on your part?
I struggle, if I'm completely honest, I struggle with sexual offences. So, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, unfortunately, I haven't had to do a vast amount. So, like as I said, the last 7 years I've been in a particular doing work of a particular specialist nature, but I have
Yes.
done some work, and it is something that I really did struggle with because I personally start off from the position of being sympathetic to the woman, to the victim, to the complainant,
Of course.
and that's just a natural sort of instinctive position I generally hold. And so
Okay.
when it comes to defending somebody who's been accused, it's something I sort of really struggle with. But then ultimately, you've kind of got to put that to one side, and because ultimately our role is to give a voice to those that we represent. But
Ooh, what, how, sorry, we're gonna have to unpack that for me.
yeah,
Because I'm thinking, it's something you just said that your starting position is that one of sympathy to the woman,
yeah,
and not, but then you just put that to the side and say, I have to run a defense. And first of all, do you still run effective defenses for cases that you feel compromised in,
yeah. Okay,
morally?
so first of all, the starting point is, and this is the bit where I sort of have to grapple and I guess reorder things. So on the one hand, I have sympathy for the victim. On the other hand, every defendant has the right to a fair trial. So it's not. I'm not in a position, and no lawyer should ever sit there and judge a client. That's not our job. We effectively operate just like a surgeon. You operate on the body without make passing judgment on them. So you dispense with that. And what you do is you have to clinically look at a case and you will say to a client, these are the strengths in your case and these are the weaknesses in your case. Okay, so you weigh it up for them. You can say, look, it's quite strong, like 90% strong, and sort of this little bit here is weak. So this is you give them
Okay.
an assessment, they decide what to do if they want to plead. Sometimes a case, and this is why we shouldn't do it, sometimes a case can be on paper appear strong, but that doesn't mean that the client necessarily did it. It's a question of what evidence has been gathered, how it's been presented. But the client, the lay client, the defendant may have another side of the story. I mean, I remember. I mean, this is going back a very long time ago, but I
Yeah.
was instructed on a rape case. And
Okay.
I read the witness statements, the victim, the witness statements, the complainant statements, and it was
Yes.
seemed quite harrowing on the face of it. And so I thought, gosh, this doesn't look great. Anyway, let's meet with the client. And so it was two sisters who were making allegations of rape, saying that they were married, their husbands were abroad, their father, who's very elderly, had brought them over, and they had
Okay.
children. And he was a neighbor who was effectively helping them, to get, housing benefit or whatever it was, whatever they needed, he helped them. And that, whilst doing all of this, he was also raping both of them. And so I met with the client, and It was interesting because the account I got from him was, of course,
Yeah.
different to what they were saying. But as a barrister, as you're building a defense case, you've got to look at all the gaps in the case and say, well, what about this? What about this? What about that? And what about this? And to be honest, he had good answers. And in the end, we sought disclosure. So, disclosure is where you ask the prosecution to serve some documents on you. And we also
Okay.
obtained other documents. And it actually, in the end, transpired that he was actually in relationships with both of the sisters. And so they'd found out, and they
Oh,
would, and they had given a really good kind of story.
alibi.
Yeah, they effectively backed each other up because they were mad that he was seeing both of them,
Oh
you know.
wow.
And we had
Blah.
pictures of,
Is
yeah,
this court or is this Jeremy Kyle? This
this
feels
is
like a
Jeremy
good cup of
Kyle. I know.
tea.
I know. And so, yeah, and ultimately the prosecution dropped the case because there was so much evidence to the contrary that we managed to unearth, which showed that actually it
Yes.
was the case. And actually, and that was very early on in my career. And I thought, you know what, this is precisely the reason why we shouldn't pass judgment on any client. If they tell me they haven't done it, then that's what we say to the court, and we represent that case. We're not there to dispense judgment. We're not there to say, oh, but you definitely did it, and
Uh,
I can't. I'm having a, attack of conscience. I can't represent you. You can't.
but my next question to that then would be, okay, fair enough. You can't judge a client, but if they said they haven't done it, but you believe in your heart of hearts that they have,
Yeah.
then what?
That's irrelevant. How can you though? I mean, the example I've just given is one where, in my heart, I thought, "Gosh, because I have this instinctive sympathy for anybody who complains about any kind of sexual abuse." For me, I struggled with it, but when I met the client and when I spoke to him, it completely transformed the whole thing.
Okay.
So that's why it's important, because we're there effectively as their representatives. If they say they haven't done it, then that is what you advance in court. If they say
Okay.
they have done it, that's different. Okay, so not what I believe in my heart, because what I felt in my heart was wrong. And so if they tell me, though, they've done it, then what we can do for them as barristers is very different. So I can't go to
And
court,
that
for
is
example. It is very different. So if, for example, Momadou, when you're acting in self-defense after being attacked,
hypothetically, hypothetically.
hypothetically, after when a white racist throws the first
Yes.
blow and you
And
respond,
I
you
dodge,
dodge,
obviously.
and then you act in self-defense of yourself and undoubtedly others. If you told me actually that's not true and I threw the first punch, I can't then go into court and concoct a defense knowing
Okay, yes.
if you've already told me. So what I would say to you,
Yes.
Mamadou, if that's the case, then you have a few options. You can plead guilty and take your
Yep.
sentence, or I can continue to represent you, but I can only go so far. So I can't say to the other person that, no, you threw the first blow and Mamadou acted in self-defense. I can't do that as a lawyer. It's unethical. And the
Okay.
third thing is you can just sack me and get a fresh new lawyer and don't tell them you did it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
This is that legal advice? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, don't hold me to it. I'm gonna have a disclaimer at the end of all of this.
Definitely, I'll put it in the comments as well.
Yeah.
People don't think we're kind of giving them this as legal advice. It's just a conversation,
I
guys.
know
Just a
that a lot of
conversation.
people ask this question: how do you represent those that are guilty, that you believe are guilty? Belief doesn't matter because you could always be wrong. The evidence in court doesn't.
Fair enough.
The evidence in court isn't necessarily the whole truth. The evidence is a snapshot that the police have managed to gather. And that's
Hmm.
it. There are other things that may be inadmissible. There may be other things, so it can't be admitted as evidence in court. There may be other things, for example, that the police haven't managed to gather, which could have shed a different light. And that's why you'd never, it's not our role to judge. We act as their
Fair enough.
as their mouthpiece.
It's just a job.
It's a job, yes. It's the role that we have to play, and we've got to
It's
be.
a role. Fair enough. But I don't want to kind of
Mhm.
diminish the role that you play. 'Cause I think it's an important one.
Thank you.
In terms of in the UK context, what's your view on the police?
I've come across one good police officer.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Just the one.
As-
I think it was in relation to a murder. I found that he was very sort of impartial and not that he was determined, he was focused, but he didn't break down and cry when, people were acquitted. And I think that's good
Oh,
because
okay, okay.
people have a role to play and, you've got to be fair. But what's my view of the police? Do
Yes.
you
Well,
want to?
so my view is known. I don't work with them, so maybe you can give me the inside story from my perspective. I think
Yeah,
that it's like maybe 90% 10%, 90 are terrible. No, maybe like half are terrible, 40 are just there trying to do something, and 10 are okay. But even me, that's just me being generous because my experience with the police
yeah,
on the largely have been quite negative, if I'm
yeah.
honest.
Well,
So,
yeah,
but
well,
you work with them.
yeah. I don't work with them. I
Oh,
work.
sorry, don't work with them. You're right.
I don't work with them. I defend. So I'm always
But you interact with them, no? You have interactions with them.
interactions in the sense when they're in the witness box and I question them, I cross-examine them. That's my interaction. Yeah,
Ooh,
I
can I get invited to watch you in court?
You're most welcome to come. It's I cross-examine them, so I don't sort of have any dealings with them at all, other than when if they come to court, they sit behind the prosecutor. They're part of the prosecution team. I don't directly liaise with them. I speak to the prosecutor. If the prosecutor needs something, he gets it from the police. The interaction I
Okay.
have with the police or security services is when I cross-examine them when they're in the witness box.
Ooh, well, let's do it for our beautiful and amazing listeners. Yeah, I'm a police officer on the witness
Yeah,
box. I'm a police officer in the witness box who has said that I pulled over this group of young black males and the car smelt of weed.
yeah.
How are you cross-examining me?
Well, I had that actually, and let me tell you, this is quite a funny story. I mean, I had this very early on. I mean, a lot of the cases, when you're a junior barrister, you get a lot of these cases where every black
Yeah,
man is smoking weed and they just happen
yeah,
to drive past and smell it. And so I had one of these cases. And what's really interesting is when you have like about five officers saying the same thing, how do you negate that? Because
yes,
the jury will say, oh, police officers, they're law enforcement officials. Of course, everything they say is gospel. How do you
yeah,
even break that into something else? How do you find the gaps? And so I had,
yeah.
I think it was three or four police officers in this particular case who said exactly that. And so the first police officer came in. I said, and he gave his name, and I said, is this your statement? He said, yes. I said, have you spoken to anybody before drafting your statement? No. Have you discussed the contents of your statement before drafting it? No. Did you sit with anybody when you were drafting it? No. Did you have any contact with anybody whilst you were drafting your statement? No. Have you discussed the contents of your
But why?
statement?
I'm not even in the witness box, and you're making me sweat.
Yeah.
I'm not even on trial here, and I'm the one that's sweating.
That's good. And so I said, okay, well, let me read your statement. And so I went through it line by line. I said, and this is in front of a jury. And I said, so this is the first line. I read it out. Is this what you have in front of you? Is that your statement? He said, yes. I read second line, third line, fourth line. I read a whole page of a statement. I said, everything that I've read out, is that contained within your statement? He said, yes. I said, are you telepathic? He said, what? I said, do you have the power of telepathy? Do you read minds? He said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. I said, let's assume he's PCX. I said, I've just
Yes.
read out PCZ's statement line by line, and you seem to have exactly the same statement word for word. You didn't sit with anybody, you didn't
Oh my
discuss it with
god.
anybody.
Oh, I love that.
Like, it was good fun. I enjoyed it because he didn't have an answer. And of course, he had to say he's not telepathic. And then it was fun because then we got PCZ to come in and we did exactly the
Yes.
same thing. And so you had three or four police officers coming in who, and we did the same sort of thing to them. And so we were acquitted in 20 minutes. And it was at Snaresbrook.
Wow.
Omran, we're pleased to know, it was
Oh,
at
that's Nesbrook. Our good old trusted friend.
Snaresbrook. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love hearing those kind of stories. So, in what you do and how you do it, does representation matter in your opinion?
Does representation matter? Yes, definitely. I mean, it matters. There are lots of ways, I guess, the question could be interpreted. Does having good representation matter? So, having good lawyers
Okay.
represent you, that matters. Because it can alter the outcome, good defense lawyers can alter the outcome of a case. Yeah,
I do mean more
in
specifically
terms of
representation in terms
diversity.
of
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. No, that definitely matters. Diversity matters in any profession, in any job, because when you have people from diverse backgrounds, they bring a fresh, new approach to things. It's
Of
innovative.
course.
They look at things in a way that others may not have looked at. And it definitely matters. You have juries which are mixed, and you can appeal to a mixed jury if you have, somebody from a BAME background. They can appeal
Yes.
to it. They have a certain appeal to a jury. It matters on so many levels. It matters from even a business perspective for chambers and solicitors firms to take on people from minority background, because sometimes when a client walks through the door, they want to see somebody like them. They
Hmm.
want to feel comfortable speaking to somebody like them, that this person will, we have shared experiences, and so they will understand where I'm coming from. It matters. And I was also going to say, I mean, it matters in the sense that when you have lawyers coming from diverse backgrounds, I mean, coming from BAME backgrounds, I personally find that they fight much harder as well, because
Okay. My next question was, me as a black person, would I prefer, if, let's say if I go to a court that's notoriously known to have an all-white jury, or
yeah.
knowing what we know, would I not prefer to have a white barrister defending me then?
Yeah, I mean, the similar logic is in a rape case. Sometimes the defendant, he wants a female representing him. And actually, I had a lot of this in counterterrorism cases where people assume that I may not be the right advocate because if I'm visibly Muslim, then I'm effectively showing or giving the impression that my client is just such a hardcore sort of radical that he'll only have other Muslims representing him. And so sometimes there have been cases where
Oh,
they
okay.
decide to do exactly that, go for, and they literally ask for like a white Jewish barrister. So that does
Yes.
happen, and that has happened. They can do that, and if they think the barrister is good, they can take their chances. But I don't think, and again, I've acted in lots of terrorism and national security cases, and I don't think that the juries have found against my clients because of me, and there have been
Okay.
cases where we've been acquitted. And sometimes, I mean, there have been cases where I've almost become the authority on certain topics, and the jury and the judge would look to me to explain certain concepts to them. So you can overcome all of those things and build a
Wow.
relationship with the jury. Jury advocacy is a very different ballgame, because you're talking to an audience that can't talk back to you. And so you have use certain tools, certain techniques to build a rapport, build a relationship with the jury so that they trust you. I think that's the main thing. And even if
Wow.
they may set out, if you're, let's say, I did a trial, I was partly sort of co opted into this trial. It was the July the 7th bombings.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had, and this was
So
very,
you've been in the game for a long time. You don't. I'm gonna.
just don't
You don't look
calculate my age.
old.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll take
I,
that. Let's stop there. Let's not go get into any further discussions
okay.
about time.
Case
But
closed.
yeah, but we can revive that later on. So the July the 7th bombing, and there were three defendants there who were accused of being part of the conspiracy to cause explosions. And as we know, there were
Wow.
explosions in the underground. And so the
Yes.
ones that were directly involved obviously died, and these guys were said to be part of this conspiracy where they themselves didn't go on the trains, but they were part of it. They knew what was going on and they assisted in it. And so, and
Okay.
this was an all white jury, if I remember correctly, the first trial, and it was at Kingston Crown Court. And so Kingston,
Okay.
I guess, is Middle England. So the jury pool you get from there is very white, very middle class. And in the first trial, the jury, and so I was a junior barrister in that trial, and there was another Muslim barrister as well on that trial. So the verdict on the first trial, they were hung jury, so they couldn't make a decision. And on the second one, they came back with a
Mm.
not guilty verdict. So I
Wow.
don't think it matters. I think as an advocate, when you go in, your job effectively is to cloak your client with a veneer of respectability. And
Okay.
irrespective of what race, color, gender you are, if you can do that, then your client has a good chance of doing well in the trial. So people can say, and sometimes people used to say this to me when I was very junior and I was at
Yes.
another different chambers, and I sort of draw the distinction because where I am currently, the clerks are very good. But in the previous set of
Okay.
chambers, they would say, well, I mean, sometimes they would say it, but a lot of the time it was more insidious. Racism, sexism, it's all insidious. You fully don't kind of
Mm.
can't, something's going on there, and it's not as tangible as it would be if you're walking down the street and somebody shouted out a racist slur. And so, my clerks would say, oh, well, this is an East End villain. Not sure if you'd get on with him. Then it was, oh, well, he's a young black gangbanger. I'm not sure you'd get on with him. And then they do it, well,
You just say gangbanger.
yes.
At least you have some slang. You're not an op.
You learn it on the job. And then I had it with, terrorism cases. Well, they may not want to. And so it's not they may not want me. It's because my clerks didn't want me to push me for these cases. And also
Okay.
because it's this, whether it's unconscious bias or just blatant racism, whichever it is, I mean, that is why they didn't push me for certain cases. So it seemed like I fit into no category. But in fact, I've represented all of those categories and all of my clients love me and I always get good results for them. And I fight much harder than most other people because if they've appointed me as their representative, I like to
Yes.
speak. I make sure they're heard.
Do you find your job quite tiring as a defense barrister, or you really do genuinely enjoy it?
I do enjoy it. When you were young, I mean, the tiring aspect is when you're starting off and you're quite junior, you've got to do shorter trials, you've got to run around between courts. It's quite hard, it's quite tough.
Okay.
It's very hard going, it's grueling. And when you're in the middle of a trial, you can't stop. It's not a 9 to 5, you clock off. You've got to prepare overnight, in the evening, whatever it is, on the weekends for your next day's work. So if you're cross-examining, you've got to prep for that. If you've got legal arguments. So you're constantly in the middle of a trial, it's just non-stop. And
Okay.
it can be quite grueling and yeah, it can be quite tough. So, but I do
I
enjoy
said,
it.
yeah, Karen. I say this with the most respect possible. I hope I never need your services.
I always say it to my clients, I hope I never see you again in the nicest possible.
Exactly. Of course. Well, you're not just an amazing barrister. You're into the fashion, aren't you? So I think that's where
Like
we
you,
hope we
Mama,
can
do.
our
Yeah.
paths can meet in that location. It seems. So tell me, what's that about?
We're kindred spirits when we do when it comes to fashion because of the work I do. And as you were saying, it can be quite stressful and quite hard hitting. And I found I was
Yeah.
spending a lot of time at Belmarsh High Security Prison seeing clients. That's where they
Okay.
put a lot of the terrorist suspects. And so I spent a lot of time there. And I thought, there's got to be a little bit more to life. I need some glamour in my life. So I set up a platform called Modest Fashion Festival. And we had a huge fashion show, which was sponsored by Bentley and Charlotte Tilbury. And it did
Ooh.
yeah, and it did really well. We had in terms of global coverage, we got 1.65 billion in terms of audience size. So yeah,
Oh
it kind of
wow.
spiraled into something quite huge. Yeah, but it was focused on modest fashion festival. So we were saying that modest fashion festival and modest fashion is something that should become mainstream. And so
Okay.
we're an industry, Muslim women have X amount of spending power and we occupy this percentage of the market. So it's about time designers paid attention and created dresses, couture dresses for us to perhaps be able to purchase. And so that was
Okay.
the message behind it. And we flew over Halima Aden for the show. So Halima's
Oh
the
wow.
first hijabi supermodel. And yeah,
Okay.
she's fantastic.
Wow. Okay. It really is nonstop for you, isn't it? It really, really is nonstop for you.
What, non-stop
I feel
talk?
like no, 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 nonstop and working and nonstop being awesome. I'm just really, really, I'm like thankful to have you on. Really,
Oh,
I'm
thank
left in
you.
awe, and it's very rare I'm left in awe. If I'm honest with you, I'm like, all these people are just cogs in the system anyway. But I'm glad that the legal system in the UK has someone like you in there.
Oh,
So,
thank you. That's very
yes,
kind.
very, very
I'm
happy.
very honored to be on your platform.
No, thank you for
Especially
having me. This,
because it's called the Malcolm effect. I have to say, actually, I was more into Martin Luther King when I was younger, and I then made the transition to Malcolm. So I totally,
as we all do,
as we all
as we
do,
all do,
we start off
as we all do.
calmer
Yeah,
and
of
then we
course.
get angrier. But
No, of course,
he's
absolutely.
misunderstood. I think he's very misunderstood by some
Oh,
people. Yeah,
100%. My first episode of this podcast, actually, when I tell my story, was that in school we were taught this, which I later discover and believe is a false dichotomy that, my MLK is the peaceful, loving guy, and
yeah,
Malcolm X was like the terrorist.
yeah,
Like terrorist-like figure, but when you later on you realize that's not the case. They just had different approaches to solve the same issue.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and again, there's many ways you can solve an issue, or many ways you can have approach an issue, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. No,
Definitely.
absolutely, absolutely.
But brilliant. This has been an amazing conversation, guys. You are listening to the Malcolm Effect with Mamadou. I will post Sultana's. Oh, maybe I won't actually. I don't know if it's confidential. I will speak off air about posting on social media and stuff. But yeah, this is the Malcolm Effect with Mamadou. Please like, comment, subscribe, whether you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Drop a like, comment, subscribe. Put a rating there as well. Let's get my views up.
Yeah,
Take care. Until
yeah,
next time.
get the ratings up, please. I need to outdo Howard and Umran.
Exactly. All right. Peace out, guys. Take care.